Hello everyone, welcome to the Pro MMA Betting podcast. So as always, we're going to break down the forthcoming UFC card, main event, late replacement. We've got Marvin Vettori coming in to take on Hermansson, and we've got a pretty solid undercard. Really like this card from a betting and a fan perspective. Missed the pod last week just because it was just a shocking card. I couldn't be bothered to talk about some of the fights on there. Some of them were real low level as it gets, particularly the women fights that they put on. So I did skip it. But I'm back this week. I like this card, as I said, betting and a fan perspective. Quick recap, guys, on this is a betting service at the end of the day. Guys do pay for my betting picks, whether it's pre-bets or live bets or both. So just a quick recap on the service. Since UFC 255, which was the last time I done a podcast. So pre-bets on that event, we were up just under 2 units. Last week we were up on pre-bets 1.66 units, and across live betting the last couple of weeks we're up around 6 units. So combined, we're looking at around 10 units profit over the last couple of weeks. So good going. Hopefully we can continue that for the remainder of the year and finish strong. All bets are tracked, guys. There's 3 links below this video with links to all the trackers for pre-bets and the live betting tips. And you can also access them through the website Pro MMA Betting.com. If you go to betting record, I think it says, I can't remember exactly, but if you go to that part of the website, all the bets are tracked there as well. So full transparency, give us a follow on Twitter at Pro MMA Betting. If you want to sign up to the service, packages are all available on the website as well. You can sign up for a week, a monthly, 6 monthly, yearly. As I always say, best bang for your buck is the yearly. Yeah, I know, I'm going to say that it's just the most expensive package, but genuinely it is. It's the one where you go through the peaks and the troughs. If you just sign up for a month, it might be a bad month. And equally, it might be a really good month, and it might lull you into a false sense of security where, well, this guy's, is he doing this every month? So, I'm not. I can't win every event. I'm very transparent like that. It's impossible. The aim of the service and the aim for me, it's my job at the end of the day, is betting on mixed martial arts predominantly, is to win long term. You've got to take the peaks with the troughs. You've got to treat it like the stock market. There will be ups and downs. But you've just got to apply intelligent betting sense to the bets you make. You've got to have reasons for why you're making these bets. And you've got to learn and evolve. And I'll give you a prime example of me personally trying to learn and evolve all the time. I don't think I know it all, far from it. Is we had a 1 unit bet on Luke Sanders at the weekend. We got him as the underdog, and I didn't bet him as the favourite. I wouldn't have bet him as the favourite. We tipped him at, I think, plus 125. I got slightly better than that on Bet Online. Now, it was a bit of a conundrum for me because I have this debate with myself as to whether I should be betting flaky fighters. Now, Luke Sanders, straight up flaky fighter. There's no debating it, and he demonstrated that on Saturday night. A fight he was easily winning, a fight that he should have won if he showed an ounce of fight IQ, and he threw it away. But it was predictable what he done. After round 1, which he won comfortably, I was still very nervous. I was not content at all. And he ultimately messed it up and we lost a unit. So for me as a bettor, I need to ultimately decide now. I've tended to err on the side of caution with flakes in the sense that I won't bet them unless they're the underdog. But now I'm just coming to a new way of approaching flakes, and I don't think I'm going to bet them at all moving forward, even as underdogs. It's just not worth it. Flake's flake at the end of the day. You can't trust them. And yeah, you can argue, they're the underdog, so long term, will you win betting on them? I'd have to look at some stats and look at the fighters that have been underdogs that I'd consider flakes. But I just feel like I'm left with a bad taste in my mouth more often than not when I bet a flake, even though I've now switched to really only being interested in them if they are an underdog. So just an example of how I'm trying to improve myself, and therefore the service I provide is I just think moving forward. And I'll give you an example. We've got Michael Johnson. He's got a fight with Clay Guida coming up at the beginning of February, which funnily enough, someone notified me of straight after the Sanders fight. And on paper, it seems like a solid fight for Michael Johnson, but I'm not betting it. He's going to be the favourite as well, so I'm definitely not touching it. But I'm just not. I mean, the more I thought about it, the more I actually think it could be a bit of a banana skin. It might not be the great stylistic matchup that I potentially thought it was, but either way, it's just, that's going to be a test of my resolve, and I'm already saying there's no chance I'm touching it. And like I say, he's going to be the favourite anyway, so I'm just steering clear. So that's just an example of how I try and improve myself on a weekly basis and hold my hands up. I mean, I did say to the guys from the start, look, he might flake and combust. I put a tweet out even saying, is Luke Sanders going to deliver, or is he going to just combust like he always does? But now I've got to, I don't want to be throwing away $1,000 betting on a flake, even if I feel there's value on the odds. It's just not worth it. So that's part of my evolution as a bettor. So just going back to the service. So weekly, monthly, 6 monthly or yearly, most of the guys are with me for 12 months. I'd say 95% of members are signed up for 12 months, but you've got to take a long-term vision, guys. You can't throw your toys out the pram after one losing event. We're going to have losing events. What I do try and do is minimise the losses, in the sense that you're not going to lose 15, 20 units in a night with me. It's not going to happen. Equally, you're not going to have a massive winning night with me where you win 15, 20 units, because I don't believe in putting 20%, 25, 30% of your bankroll on the line across one event. That's suicidal betting, in my opinion. I prefer to keep things tighter. And while, as I say, the events won't be massive winning events, it's a long-term process for me. It's steady profit across the course of a year. That's how I approach every, as Conor McGregor called it, his season. I view the calendar year as my season, basically. So I always consider the start of the year in mid-January, when the UFC normally kicks off, right through to mid-December, when the UFC normally ends and has around 4 weeks off. So if you want to sign up to the service, it's on the website ProMMABetting.com. We also have a private Discord channel. That's where live betting tips are given out. We freeze the channel during the fights. Live betting tips are given during the fights, and it's unfrozen when the fight is finished. Good community in there as well. A lot of guys in there discussing the fight. So if you want to discuss fights with someone, or more than one, there's a fair few people in there that regularly contribute, then it's a good opportunity there to chat with like-minded people. So ProMMABetting.com is the website. As I've said, all bets are tracked. I throw out bet slips on Twitter. I don't cover up the stakes like all the other touts that throw out bet slips. Full transparency from me. I am betting what I'm tipping. My balls are on the line as much as the members is. So I'm with the guys all the way in terms of what I tip. I bet. I won't tip anything that I don't bet. I don't tip openers, because most guys won't be able to get the bets on at those prices. I wait until the lines consolidate before I give out the bets. Full transparency. There's no giving out stupid odds that no one can get on. It doesn't happen. I just wait till the lines settle. Yeah, it's a pain in the arse, because I know some guys can jump on openers, but I have to be fair to everyone, and unless you've got bet online, you aren't getting the openers these days. So, and a lot of people don't have bet online, so full transparency in that sense as well. But let's jump into the card, guys. We'll start, as we always do, from the very first fight on the card. Just a reminder to people that maybe are tuning in for the first time, and just a reminder to regular listeners, because I know I've been a little bit hit or miss with the podcast in the COVID era. It is a betting podcast. I'm not just going to pick who I think wins. I'm going to look at line value. We're going to look at someone and determine, I don't know, if they're minus 225 for 4 to 9. Odds would imply that they've got a 75% chance of winning. Is that, or 70%? I think it's 70%. So if you break that down in terms of how many times they fight, how many times you need the fighter to win. So for example, if they fought 10 times, the odds are saying that the fighter that's minus 225 is going to win 7 times out of 10. If you think that's accurate, then there's no value on the line. If you think they win 8 times out of 10 or 9 times out of 10, then you've got some value there. So I always look at things from a value perspective. My gut does come into play as well. If I think the odds are off, my gut strongly just thinks the fighter's going to win. Normally, I will still pick the fighter that my gut just tells me is going to win. But more often than not, we'll go with the value, because long term, like I keep saying, I always refer back to this being long term. Betting for me is a long term process. Long term betting, when I feel that odds are off, should yield profit for me long term. Like I say, we can't win every bet, especially when you bet like this. When you're betting on value, you are going to lose bets because you're going against the grain, against the guy that's probably going to win more often than not. But if there's value on the line, you have to take it, guys, especially if you feel strongly about it. Like I say, sometimes with me, if I get a gut feel that line's off, but I just don't think the guy's going to win, I generally won't go against my gut. But if I've got a strong read, and even my gut says, look, this guy can win this fight, then we'll go with the value. So bear that in mind with my picks. I'm not just picking who I think wins. I mean, I do say this when I'm actually giving out the picks, but we're going with the line value. I'm not just picking fighter A because I think he's going to win. There's some meaning behind the madness. I'm looking at the value. I'm trying to make money long term here. So just bear that in mind when we're breaking down the picks. So first fight on the card, we've got Louis Smolka taking on Jose Quinones. This fight was meant to happen a couple of weeks ago. Got cancelled because Smolka had a bad weight cut, botched his weight cut. Just a bit worried. I mean, he used to fight at 125. He's moved up to 135 now. He's definitely put on some muscle mass. Looks a lot better physically than he used to. He trains at Colin O'Yama's now. He seems to have his head screwed on. I know he's had some alcoholism problems, but seems to be in a good place now. I think he's married, or he's got a partner at least. He's got a kid. So head seems to be in the right place, but it's a bit of a worry that he missed weight there. And then he's having to cut weight again a couple of weeks later. And the fight, he missed weight, then the fight was still on, and then it got cancelled. I'm not entirely sure why. I'm assuming it was a medical reason relating to the weight cut. And here he is back a couple of weeks later having to cut the weight again. So that straight away is a bit of a red flag. I'm actually not bad in betting Louis Smolka fights. I've bet on his fights 4 times, I believe, from memory. I bet him all the way back in... year was it? In 2014. I bet him against Richie Vasilik. The reason I remember that bet is because it was looking like a losing bet. He was 2 rounds down and he pulled Sweet Chin Music out in the 3rd round to win the fight. So it's always stuck with me, that one. I bet him against Paddy Houlihan as well a year or so later. I think it was the main event in Ireland. I just remember that because it's probably one of the worst main events the UFC's had in the modern era. It was around even money as well, so I remember there was a really good price on that, and he overwhelmed Paddy. And then I bet against him when he took on Ray Borg and Tim Elliott. I remember the Ray Borg price was really good. We got about -120, -130, I'm sure, on Ray Borg, and it was... I mean, I don't know. It's tough to get lines like that these days because it was such a difficult stylistic fight for Smolka. I couldn't believe the price. So yeah, both those bets came in. So I'm 4-0. I've not bet him since, or bet against him since the Tim Elliott fight. I don't believe. No, I haven't. So he got cut from the UFC, won a few fights on the regional scene, had a bit of a war with Carl Estrada. He was in all sorts of trouble in the first round. He was getting rocked all over the place. Got a short notice call to come in against Sue Madaji, who looks like a completely different fighter now. I think if they rematch now, Smolka would probably be in all sorts of bother. But he won that fight. He just kept getting Sue to the ground. Eventually got a submission. Lost quickly to Matt Schnell. He beat Ryan McDonald, and then he's coming off that quick loss to Casey Kenny. So you can see he has improved at Team Oyama. He's impressive on the feet. He goes to the body well. His boxing's definitely improved, but he's quite slow and he's not physically strong he wasn't physically strong at 125, so at 135 he's definitely going to struggle with the physicality. He's taking on Quinones here, who, I'm not overly high on Quinones. I think I've bet on 2 of his fights in the past. I bet him to lose against Sean O'Malley, and I bet him against Diego Rivas. Don't think I've touched any of his fights besides them. He was fighting pretty irregular. I mean, he's been in the UFC since 2014. He fought once in 2014, once in 2015, once in 2016, once in 2017, once in 2018. Had a couple of fights in 2019, and as long as this fight happens, he's going to have had 2 fights in 2020. So upped it slightly, but he still doesn't fight overly regular. He's at the Entram gym in Mexico, which is where Brandon Moreno is, so he is at a good camp. On the feet, he's a decent point scorer on the feet. He's got a very tippy-toey type style on the feet, which it stops him being able to generate much power. Now, I know he dropped Carlos in his penultimate fight, which is one of the few shots that he kind of really stepped into, but generally he's high on his toes, very tippy-toey. It stops him having much power, so he's not really much of a KO threat. He's got decent takedowns from the body lock, and he's got a decent ground game, but he is a little bit chinny. I think Nathaniel Wood dropped him. Ishihara had him dropped a couple of times. Sean O'Malley's coming off that knockout loss there. Not entirely sold on his chin. I'm not sure how he's going to deal with Louis Smoker's pressure on the feet. I mean, Smoker is very hittable, but as I say, he's probably going to be one moving forward. Quinones is going to be moving back. Quinones uses a lot of leg kicks. It's kind of where most of his shots come from on the feet. He's very leg kick heavy, but doesn't really do any damage with the leg kicks. So I've seen a few of his fights where he's landed a lot, and he's never seemed to jeopardise anyone. Again, I think it comes down to his stance, where he's high on his feet, tippy-toey, just can't generate much power into the shots. So, I mean, it's a tough fight for me to have a solid read on because, Louis Smoker is a bit of a liability. He goes for like an outside single leg a lot. You would think he would have learnt his lesson from the Moreno fight, but he was going for it against Sue as well. I'm sure he was doing it in the Kyle Estrada fight. It does worry me that he just leaves his neck out there to be snatched. I don't think it's going to matter here, but I do think his durability is starting to wane a little bit as well. He's always been, very tough, but Casey Kenny dropped him before he subbed him. He got hurt very badly against Kyle Estrada in the fight before he came back to the UFC, but I don't think it's going to matter here, but I don't really see much longevity for Louis Smoker. I've got to be honest, at 135 in the UFC, unless he gets very fortunate matchmaking, which could happen. You look at someone like Quinones. Generally, I mean, I know he's fought O'Malley and Wood, but apart from that, he's had very favourable matchmaking. So, maybe Louis Smoker will be one of them that gets some favourable matchups. But I've seen a lot of people say, no one that Quinones has beaten is still in the UFC. But guys, neither has anyone that Smoker's beat. I know he beat Sue, and Sue does genuinely look like a genuine talent now, but I think he definitely got Sue at the right time. As I said earlier, I don't think he'd win if they rematch now. So, it's not like Louis Smoker's been beat in top level competition. He's kind of, whenever he stepped up, he's lost. So, he's a slight favourite here. I just don't trust him personally, and especially when as I said, he's having to cut weight again. I mean, I'm going to pick him here because I think he's going to give Quinones problems on the feet. I think Quinones can probably get takedowns, but Smoker is very scrambly. He's got good cardio. Quinones has slowed down in fights. So I do give the edge to Smoker, but, minus 130 roughly, minus 135. I just don't particularly feel strong about it. I don't particularly have a strong feel for this fight at all, really. So it's a pass fight for me. Nothing really I can recommend. I can't fault anyone playing Quinones. I can't really fault anyone playing Smoker. The price isn't insane, minus 130. It feels quite accurate. I think I do lean him. So I probably would make him a slight favourite, but I don't have a strong lean on it, and I wouldn't recommend, unloading your bankroll on that fight. It could go either way, and I do have trust issues with Smoker and Quinones as well, in fact. Next fight on the card, we have, I think it's the Leavitt Wiman fight that is next. I'll just bring up the card. Oh, that's not. It's actually Gabriel Benitez taking on Justin James. So Benitez back down to 145, went up to 155 in his last fight where he took on the guy that's coming off the loss to Giga, Omar Morales. Benitez, we know he's a solid striker. very heavy leg kicks. It's something that you can see it in his fights, and I know that the head trainer Javier Mendez at AKA said he's just got the most powerful kicks he's ever seen. He's a vicious leg kicker, and he had his shin split open really badly against Omar Morales, so he was still throwing the kick, but I wonder how much that did affect him in the fight in terms of kind of letting the kicks go as much as maybe he would have liked to, because it must have hurt when he was fighting. I know your adrenaline's flowing and everything, but that was really, I mean, it looked like it was split to the bone. And I mean, that fight was only about, it was about 6 months ago now. I'm sure the shin's all healed up by now, so I wouldn't imagine that's going to be an issue here. But yeah, so he's coming off back-to-back losses. Sadiq Yusuff as well. He got knocked out by Sadiq. He was doing well in that fight. Sadiq was struggling a little bit with his speed. He hurt Sadiq, but he just succumbed to the power ultimately. Benitez's chin is a little bit of a question mark. He did get knocked out by Andre Fili. It was a head kick, not a punch, but still, it's not the best look in the world getting knocked out by Andre Fili. And then he's coming off that loss to Sadiq, who does crack. It's got caught with a nice counter shot. So it's, I don't want to say it's chinny, but you just got to have that little doubt in your mind there. But very good striker, very fast, good on his feet. As I said, very good kicks. He's got good hands as well. Justin James came into the UFC on short notice. He was a big underdog taking on Frank Camacho, but it caught Frank early. Just came out, swarmed him, caught him, put him away. And then he's coming off a loss to Gavin Tucker where he just got outclassed in that fight. He couldn't deal with Gavin on the feet. Gavin's got good movement, kind of a nice striking style, a bit like Benitez. He did drop Gavin Tucker at one point, but Tucker recovered, and Justin James he gassed really badly in that fight. If you look at James's record, he's not a man that's used to go into the scorecards. A lot of his fights kind of tend to end inside the distance. Now, we know Gabriel Benitez, there's no problem going 3 rounds. His cardio is not in question at all, but it wasn't a good look against Tucker. And it was the first time James had fought at 145. I did look at this when I taped the fight. I think it was the first time for a long time that he's been down at 145. You can see he's quite a thick frame, so I wonder how easy that weight cut is for him, and does that jeopardise him in some respect? The last time he went 3 rounds was back in September 2017, before the Gavin Tucker fight where he got stopped in round 3. So, he had been 5 rounds before against Troy Lamson, but it had been a while, and as I say, he's now down at 145. Let me just look at that fight against Tommy Aaron. Was that was at 155. Just trying to see when he last fought, because I'm sure he's fought at 145. It might be 150. So he's even fought up at welterweight at a point and catch weights at like 160. So I don't think 145 is an easy cut for him. Just trying to see. I'm sure he has fought down there before. I can't really see any fights on his pro record. Maybe it was amateur. I can't see. If anyone remembers, I can't be bothered to flip through all his fights and that, but I'm sure he's fought at something like 150 before, but I think 145 is the first time he's cut down to that weight class. So, Gabriel Benitez puts out good volume, good kickboxer. I think James probably needs a knockout to win, possibly in round 1 to win with his cardio, and Harry might possibly slow down. The line got smashed up. He's like minus 220 now. I did tip Gabriel Benitez when he was about minus 120. I'm very happy with that play. I wouldn't play him now. Line's probably gone a little bit too wide for me. But you can see why Benitez is the favourite here. I think James is the KO or bust, and it may well be that he needs a KO in the first half of the fight, especially if his cardio lets him down again. So pick is Gabriel Benitez there. Good fight next. I think this is going to be really entertaining. We've got Ilia Topuria taking on Damon Jackson. So we saw Topuria make his UFC debut against Yusuf Zalal. Took a a pretty comfortable decision victory. He slowed quite badly towards the end of round 3. He did take the fight on short notice, but that was the question mark with Topuria coming into the fight, because all these wins are in round 1, all these fights are over in round 1, bar one that went to mid round 2. So it was definitely a good experience for him to get 3 rounds in. He's also not trained in Spain for this camp. I think he stayed in America after the Zalal win, and he's done his camp at MMA Masters. So, I mean, he's not had long there. He's probably only been there maybe a month, 6 weeks. So it's hard for a camp to do much in that time frame, but it's definitely a good move for him, because I know for a fact at the gym he was training at in Spain, he was the best in the gym. You need to be training with guys that are better than you, that are going to test you to improve. But he's definitely got a lot of potential, because it showed how good he was when he was training at a gym where he was a top dog, you know. So he should be only improving now. He's still only very young, 23 years of age. I mean, I really like the guy. I bet him in Cage Warriors when he took on Brian Bouland, when he was an underdog. Crazy odds. I mean, in hindsight, that they made him the underdog there. I mean, it was quite hard to get a full read on Topuria because of all these round 1 wins and so forth. But crazy odds. He's got some power on his feet. He did show good pressure against Zalal on the feet. He was kind of backing Zalal up. But he was using his striking as a means to get the takedowns. These two are pretty similar. They're very grapple heavy, very good grapplers, very opportunistic with their submissions. You often find when 2 really good grapplers face, they end up, they cancel each other out in that respect, and you find it's like a stand-up fight. But I've got a feeling this is going to be a wild kind of scramble fest. I don't think either man's going to be worried about the other man's grappling here, and I can see this being a scramble-heavy fight. There is a path for Jackson, definitely. If Topuria, if he can survive early, drag Topuria into deep waters in a really high-paced fight, Topuria is probably going to slow down again. I don't think he's had enough time to, improve his cardio to the point where he can go a hard 3 rounds. I mean, he was last half of that 3rd round against Allan, he was really tired. And, you got to be careful with Jackson. Topuria does enter for takedowns with his head on the outside. He's definitely going to have to watch the guillotine of Jackson. But Jackson, ultimately, you need to make sure he's not going to the well too much. I mean, I know he got away with it against Bektik, but you don't want to keep putting yourself on your back, etc., in an MMA fight. But he is at a good camp. He's at Fortis. He's well trained. The head trainer there will have a good game plan here for this fight. I think, neither of them have got many KOs on their record, but they both can crack. If Topuria got a nasty KO in his fight before his UFC debut, and, you go and watch Damon Jackson before he came back into the UFC, he knocked someone out on the feet pretty nastily as well. So I think they can both crack. It's just they tend to go to their grappling. So, it'd be quite interesting on the feet if we do see any prolonged striking exchanges. But ultimately their strengths are on the mat. So, very interesting fight. I did throw a little bit of money on Damon Jackson when it opened, because he was sitting at around plus 260. He's down at around plus 200 now. I do favour Topuria here. He is the younger guy. I think he's got the higher ceiling, but I wouldn't bet him personally, just because I do worry if Jackson can make this scramble heavy, high-paced fight, drag it into deep waters. He took the Bektik fight on like 2 or 3 days' notice. Bektik's very physically strong. He was struggling with the physicality, but his cardio was fine, held up fine, and now he's at a proper camp. I have to give the cardio advantage to him, and that could play a big part here. But if he can't bag one of the first 2 rounds, he's going to need a finish in round 3. So it's, I can't fault anyone playing Damon Jackson, even at, the plus 200, but I do lean Topuria. I definitely wouldn't be playing Topuria at this price. I think there's still too many question marks, and I think Damon Jackson is really going to give him a run for his money on the ground. He's a better grappler than Zalal. He's not just going to walk through Damon Jackson on the ground here. It's going to be competitive. So I'm going to pick Jackson based on the price. I do favour Topuria, but I just think he should be a smaller favourite. I think he's getting a little bit overrated based on the UFC debut, but he is a promising prospect and he's at MMA Masters now. But like I say, they've not had long to work with him, so I can't see him coming in looking, markedly different. And this is definitely the toughest fight of his MMA career stylistically. So the pick for me is Jackson as the +200 underdog. Flyweight division next. Jimmy Flick taking on Cody Durden. I'm looking forward to this one. Jimmy Flick for me is a very good submission artist in MMA. He's very opportunistic with his submissions. You've got to be very careful of him. You've got to respect him at all times. But he is a bit of a specialist in MMA. And, in the modern era, it's harder to get away with that, especially as you get into the UFC. I think he's got some quit in him. I didn't like the way he's been taken out in some of his fights. He definitely doesn't react well to being hit. So he's going to be looking to get this fight on the floor to get a submission. Cody Durden, it's hard to get a full read on the guy because there's not a great deal of tape available on him. He put up a respectable performance on short notice in his UFC debut up at 135. He's moving down to 125 here for the first time in a long time. I maybe have been getting Durden confused with James with regards to moving down in weight. I think it's Durden, possibly not James, that has fought at 125 in the past and had a few catch weight fights at like 130. But I think it's been a long time since Durden's been down at 125. So little question mark on the weight cut, but he is training full time now for the first time. He's training at American Top Team. He's been training with a very good wrestler at American Top Team. I forget his name, but he's a lot bigger than Durden as well, the guy he's been training with. So he's definitely coming in prepared, is basically the point I'm trying to make. He 10-8'd Chris Gutierrez in the first round. From the fights I could find on Durden, he tends to take people down and try and smash them from the top, much like we saw in round 1 against Gutierrez. But he has had kickboxing and boxing bouts, so he has got stand up, and you've got to imagine he's not going to go to the grappling here. He's going to try and keep this fight on the feet, and he's going to try and bring the quit out in Jimmy Flick. I'm just not a fan of these specialists in MMA at the UFC level. It doesn't cut the mustard now. Flick might get away with it here because, is Durden UFC level? That is the question. Possibly not. So he might get another submission here, but he's going to come unstuck soon enough in the UFC. But I'm going to go with Durden here. I think there's a little bit of value. I don't know if there's value on the line. There was value on the line, I feel, because he was up at almost like +200 at one point. BFO saying +183. It's now down to about +140, +145. Pinnacle has him at +150. I just don't like laying the juice on, well, I wouldn't say it's juice, but I don't like laying someone as a favourite when, they've probably only got one path to victory, which is a submission. I just don't like it. Cody Durden's only been to a decision twice. He's only won one decision. He's finished most of his fights. And he did gas against Chris Gutierrez. Now, it was very short notice, as I've said. So, the slight concern is, how is Durden's cardio going to hold up over 3 rounds? And he's cutting down to 125. So we do have to question that for Durden. But Jimmy Flick, he's got no KO wins. That's what I mean by he's a specialist. And 13 of his 15 wins are by submission. So he's only ever won 2 decisions. Last time he went to round 3, he lost to Chris Gutierrez via calf kicks. Before that, he submitted Johnny Bedford in round 3. That was over 3 years ago. So, and he got the win over Nate Smith in round 3, but it was a, one-way fight. It wasn't really anything coming back from Nate Smith. It's always easier for your cardio to hold up if you're the one in complete control. But he's a finisher Flick, so Durden really has to watch his P's and Q's if he ends up on the floor, and he's got to fight a smart game plan here. He's got to keep the fight standing. Don't get involved in the clinch. Just, separate as quickly as possible. Frame away. try and stuff the takedowns and just try and bring the quit out in Flick, because Flick's got 5 losses and 4 of them are by KO. He doesn't, I mean, if you go and watch the Ray Rodriguez fight, it just wasn't a good look, the way he just seemed to melt in that fight. So this is what Durden needs to do. He needs to bring the quit out in Jimmy Flick, but he's got to do it intelligently. He can't be going racing in, getting over aggressive, gifting Flick takedown entries. You've got 3 rounds to work. Just bring the quit out in him. So I'm gonna pick Durden here. It's not a massively confident pick, because, as I say, I don't have a massive read on Cody Durden, but just I do like Jimmy Flick's style. It's entertaining to watch, but I don't like it from a betting perspective, because I do feel he's a bit of a specialist. I don't think it works in the higher levels of MMA, not modern MMA. And if he can't get the fight to the floor repeatedly, if he doesn't get a finish when he does get the fight to the floor, then I think he could find himself in trouble on the feet. And I don't like his reactions to being hit. Big no-nos for me in MMA. If you're in a fight, man, how can you not like being hit if you want to be a fighter? I know it sounds silly, no one likes being hit, but I just mean the reaction to being hit. You need to embrace it. Jimmy Flick's one of these guys that doesn't for me. So Durden, I think he's well prepared. I'm going to pick Durden here as the +150, +140 underdog, but I wouldn't be shocked if Flick goes in and subs him in round 1. So I definitely wouldn't be looking to make a substantial play there. The over is set at, I think, 1.5. It's a flyweight fight. Not many flyweight fights are set at over 1.5 rounds. Normally the flyweights go the distance, but you've obviously got 2 guys here who aren't really distance fighters based on their record. So, if you like Cody Durden, the over 1.5 probably seems a sensible play. But having said that, if you like Durden, you can get a much better price on his money line. So if you like Flick, and you're confident in him, you could definitely get the sub in round 1 and it would bust the over. So, I think if you like Durden's the play. If you like Flick, I'd probably avoid the over, because he could get a sub in round 1. So I don't really see, if you look at long-term profit and loss on over 1.5s in the flyweight division, I think you'll probably find that there's definitely money to be made betting the over 1.5s. But I'd rather take a stab on Cody Durden here personally than take the over. But, if he can survive on the mat, Durden, there's a good, he could still lose the fight and it goes over 1.5 if he can survive. He's never been submitted, so, or has he been submitted? He's not been KO'd actually. He's been submitted once. He's not been KO'd. So I'm going to go with Durden though as the underdog. But no. Whatever side you're on, for me personally, it wouldn't be a big play. I don't have a massively strong read on the fight, but I kind of like fading fighters with Jimmy Flick's the kind of style, and I feel he's getting a little bit overvalued because of that domination on Contender Series against, for all intents and purposes, a pretty green fighter. Next up, lightweight division, we've got Matt Wiman against Jordan Leavitt. And we continue on with the theme of a specialist here in Jordan Leavitt, very grappling heavy. I don't like it. As I just said about Jimmy Flick, I don't like it in modern MMA, but the problem with Leavitt, he's not as dangerous with the submissions as Jimmy Flick. At least, Jimmy Flick's very opportunistic, whereas Leavitt, he's not a bad grappler, bad submission guy, but I don't see the opportunism, dangerous submission threat. For someone like Flick, it could be over at any moment. Whereas Leavitt, I don't see the danger being as stark. And he's got, he's a heavier guy as well. He fights at lightweight, so more dangerous on the feet if you haven't got any stand up. You're going to be facing some real killers on the feet, and he hasn't. He's got no KO wins. Kind of says it all, a bit like Jimmy Flick. Most of his wins are by submission. Just very, very one-dimensional. Got a nice win on the Ultimate Fight, on the Contender Series. Quick submission win over Jose Flores. Got the takedown, got the submission. But I'm not sold on his long-term prospects in the UFC. Now, the UFC are giving him a winnable fight here. but I'd argue that giving Matt Wiman a chance to snag a win. Now, I have to favour Jordan Leavitt. Old guard against new guard. Matt Wiman's 37 years of age now. He had a long layoff, like 5 years or so. He came back, just got beaten up by Louis Pena, ultimately stopped in the third round, and just grapple fucked by Joe Solecki for 3 rounds. But, I mean, Joe Solecki is a bit of a... He's not as bad as Jordan Leavitt and a Jimmy Flick in terms of a specialist. You can see he's worked on his stand-up and so forth. But Solecki is does favour the grappling. But Jordan Leavitt is definitely more of a specialist in the sense he's not as well-rounded as Joe Solecki. And, he's going to give Matt Wiman a fight. He wants Matt Wiman won't mind a grappling threat. There's not really going to be any threat here for Matt Wiman in terms of getting beaten up. Jordan Leavitt's he's not a vicious fighter. He's not going to take him down and pound him out. It's very unlikely. He's going to get a bit of a nice grappling fight. And on the feet, Matt Wiman could, he could make this a bit of a scrappy fight on the feet. So, look, I do lean Jordan Leavitt just because he's the younger guy, but I mean, the line is awful. I mean, I don't know. People are betting Jordan Leavitt at like minus 400. Guys, you can't, if you're just betting just to throw a little bit of money on something just to make it entertaining, fair enough. But if you want to win some decent money long term in MMA, you can't be betting people like Jordan Leavitt at minus 400 and throwing him in parlays. Long term, like, he might win here. I'm not saying he's not going to win, but long term, it's a losing proposition. You can't be betting someone like that who's that one-dimensional in modern MMA in the UFC at minus 400. You are going to lose money long term doing it. Who was that guy the other week? The twin brother guy, Cody. Never been past round 1. I'm not saying he's a one-dimensional guy. It was really hard to get a read on him because there wasn't much tape that was available. He wins in seconds. He got bet up to like minus 500. People were throwing him in parlays. Guys, it's a losing proposition long term. The guy had never been past like mid round 1 and he was minus 500. Yes, the other guy looked trash on tape. But what happens when we get past round 1? Big question marks. Alarm bells should be ringing. And the fear of what happened. He gassed out. He couldn't get the finish in round 1. He gassed. And he ended up getting stopped. You can't be putting people like that in parlays if you want to win money long term. If you're taking this serious, if you're just messing around, don't worry about it. Do what you want. But if you want to win some decent money, make an additional side income, stop doing crap like that. And it starts with Jordan Leavitt. Do not be putting him in your doubles. Not saying he's not going to win. He might well win here. But what I'm talking about is long term. You need to think of this long term. If you want to make money long term, you can't be putting people like him in doubles. It's a losing proposition. I promise you, long term. The odds are saying that he wins 80% of the time. I mean, if you're betting him straight for argument's sake, you'd have to get this bet right 5 times in a row to have any profit. And then if you lose the next one, you've only profited $100. If you're betting, just say you're betting $400 to win $100, you'd have to bet this 4 times in a row to win $400. You'd have to win it 4 times in a row to win $400. And if you lose the 5th time, you bet a minus 400. You've lost all your winnings from the previous 4. It's just a losing proposition. The guys, don't do it. Jordan Leavitt is one-dimensional as hell. He's not going to be in the UFC long unless he is matched very, very favourably. And he's got a favourable matchup here. But, I mean, the odds are a joke. Look, I think Jordan Leavitt wins, but I would have this at, I don't know, minus 200, 70%, or minus 225, 70%, probably minus 225, 80%, no way. So I'm going to have to pick Matt Wiman, and I'm going against my gut here, because my gut's saying, look, Leavitt's going to win this fight. But those odds are just too off for me to listen to my gut. And if you're going to bet this fight, I would put something on. If you have to bet every fight, you're that type of guy, or I'd have to put something on Matt Wiman. I'm not betting it personally on passing, just so you know, I'm not betting Matt Wiman. But I think if there's any value on the fight, it's on Matt Wiman. But he is shot, he is 37. He's not looked good in his 2 comeback fights, but he's got a winnable fight here. He's never going to get a more favourable matchup. Much like Jordan Leavitt isn't going to get a more favourable matchup. They've both got a really favourable matchup here to get a W in the UFC. But you can't be laying the minus 400. So I'm picking Matt Wiman. Extremely unconfident pick, but the line is garbage. So I have to go with a plus 300. Next fight on the card. Oh, God. Jesus Christ, what are they doing to me? One Villante, Gian Villante, taking on Jake Collier. I put up a joke tweet earlier in the week saying, who wants to take minus 250 that Villante comes in looking pregnant, but he still comes in looking in better shape than Jake Collier. Neither of them have, well, Villante does have social media, but he doesn't update it. Collier, I couldn't find his social media. I'm really intrigued to see the weigh-ins here. One sec, actually put my charger on. I mean, what did Villante do in his last fight? He didn't look that bad in the fight, to be fair. Physically, he looked awful. First fight, heavyweight, came in, I think, at the limit. But he gave Maurice Green a decent fight. It was a very close fight. Going into the 3rd round, and he had Maurice Green in all sorts of trouble, and then he got tapped from a head and arm choke from the bottom, which I don't think I've seen since Chuck Liddell against Jeremy Horn. Well, actually, I have seen it. I think Perez caught Ian Heinisch with it in LFA. But it looked like a complete exhaustion tap to me. That did not look like it was locked in properly. I think he just tapped due to exhaustion. He just trying to go for the finish, just absolutely emptied the gas tank. Keith Trimble in Villante's corner is hilarious because Keith Trimble is like, I wonder what Villante's training routine is. Does he train much? Because I've got to think, like, Keith Trimble seems like a real no-nonsense guy. He seems like the type of guy that if you're not in the gym training, he won't corner you. But he's always there in Villante's corner, and you can just sense, well, not sense because he seems like a pretty straight-talking guy, the utter frustration Keith Trimble feels every time he's cornering Villante. It's absolutely hilarious. You can just see he wants. It's like Villante. I've got a feeling Villante's probably pretty good in the gym because it seems like Trimble is just frustrated with him in fights, like he's not delivering on his potential. But I just think Villante doesn't take it seriously. You could see that in his last fight, the condition he came in. He's taking on Collier, who disappeared, then came in. Oh my God, the state of him. I didn't see the weigh-ins when he fought last time. I remember I didn't catch his actual physical condition until just before the card started. I just had a quick look. Straight away, I had to put a bet on the English chap to win in, was it Inside the Distance? I think I bet. I tipped it as well to members because it was just like, oh my God, this guy's, it's just a joke. So, look, it's hard to trust Villante, but I think Villante's going to win here. Collier just looked like, I mean, I don't know what's happened to him. The guy used to be at middleweight. Now he's massively out of shape heavyweight. Villante's about minus 200, so it's, you can't really be betting him. You can't get behind that. But I would go with Villante here. The over is set at 1.5 rounds. It's at about minus 150. Historically, let me just bring up Villante's record. Or Collier's. I just want to remind myself how durable he was historically. I know he's obviously come off that quick knockout loss, but been knocked out 3 times. Second round by Dongi Yang. Veranda. That's not a good look. He's got some knockout losses there early against underwhelming guys. Villante though, I mean, when did he last knock someone out? I know he came close against Maurice Green, but ultimately he lost the fight. Ed Herman distance. Rosa distance. I mean, he hasn't knocked anyone out since Safarov. And he nearly nosed out as well. Safarov was on like one leg. And then Anthony Preux. I remember betting him against Preux. I think I got him as the underdog. It was just, even for Villante, that was nuts. It's a great stylistic fight for him. So he's not like he's going out putting people away. I mean, probably a bit of value on the over. but it's just, you know, I don't really know what Jake Collier is. I mean, he got knocked out at middleweight, now he's at heavyweight, and he got sparked in 10 seconds last time at heavyweight. I think you just got to pass, guys, and just watch this fight for the comedy value. I can't wait for the weigh-ins. Main card next, so we've got Movsar Evloev taking on Nate Landwehr. But Evloev's unplayable now. He's been bet up to -600. Everyone's parlaying him up. No surprise there. Yeah, Evloev's, you know, he should win this fight. He's decent on the feet. He can probably win on the feet if he wants to, but, you know, really good wrestling. Should be a routine win for him, I would have thought. No value on the money line. No value on the over. No value on decision. Just a pass fight for me. Like I said, I know everyone's parlaying him up now. He's getting -700 at some places. So Evloev, I'm not going to go into that fight. There's no point. Raymond Dolidze taking on John Allan. Raymond Dolidze, I'm on the fence about this guy. I'm not overly impressed when I watch tape on him. You know, he's coming off. I watched his last 3 fights. He's very low volume on the feet. He basically just wings and overhand. His last 2 KO wins, you know, low percentage stuff, spinning back fist, and then against Cadiz, he landed, you know, he threw a kick and the knee landed. It's one of them fluky kick come knee KOs that you see a couple of times a year in the UFC. Yeah, he's got some grappling background. I think he won the ADCC Asia trials. You know, it doesn't mean much. Competed in the feeder grappling competition, which, you know, I'm aware of that. I remember when I was training pretty heavily back in the early noughties that was going on then. I remember it being in Turkey. Some of my teammates went over there. You know, it's not I don't know what level it's at now. It wasn't a high level competition really back then. Not compared to like ADCC and Polaris, etc. Yeah, I'm just underwhelmed by the guy. The 3 fights I watched, he didn't get any grappling going. He did try and take down the Brazilian guy he fought, who he knocked out with a massive overhand in the second round, but he couldn't get the Brazilian down. I just wasn't overly impressed. He is a unit though. He's a big guy, and he's been in America for about the last 3 months. I think he's at Extreme Couture. So he's up to his training level, but I don't know, the jury's out for me on him. I'm just not sold. He has got big power, but I'm just not sold on him. John Allan, we haven't seen for a while. He did fall victim to USADA, so I wonder if his performance is going to be affected at all coming in off USADA. Is he going to look any different? Dolidze is going to be bigger than him. Allan is a little bit of an undersized light heavyweight, but he's got fast hands, really fast hands for a light heavyweight, good hands. The Mike Rodriguez fight was overturned to a no contest, but you know, solid fight there. He was, he fought smart against Mike Rodriguez. He was struggling to get inside Mike Rodriguez at first. Mike's a solid striker and the big reach advantage. So started using takedowns on Mike. Just a smart strategy. I hope he doesn't go that route here against Dolidze. This is a fight where he should just be keeping on the feet. Dolidze isn't on the level of Rodriguez with the striking. He does hit hard, Dolidze, so obviously Allan needs to be wary of that, but don't try and go to the grappling here. He's done a couple of things in the Rodriguez fight I didn't like. He did pull Rodriguez on top of him at one point. He also dropped for a guillotine at one point as well. He needs to make sure he's not doing any of that garbage. But Allan's never been KO'd, so he's got a solid chin. He has been submitted a few times. So, you know, Dolidze, if I'm in Dolidze's corner, I'm wanting him to try and get his grappling going here, because that's where Allan has shown a weakness. We saw him subbed on the Contender Series. You know, Vinicius Moreira isn't good, but he is a very good grappler. He's very good on top, and ultimately he got the triangle from the bottom when Allan reversed him. But you know, that seems to be the easiest path for Dolidze here, because on the feet, I just think Allan's combination punching, his speed, you know, unless Dolidze lands a bomb, I think he gets shot out on the feet here personally, and I'm surprised money's been pouring in on Dolidze. I mean, Allan's up to plus 160, plus 165. I mean, he's plus 168 at Pinnacle. I don't agree with that line at all. I'm not seeing where this Dolidze hype's coming from personally. You know, a couple of low percentage KO wins in his last 2 fights. there's no combination punching. He just wings overhands. He is a unit though. I'm just not seeing it unless he can get his grappling going. If you say to me now, this is a stand-up fight for 3 rounds, I favour John Allan. But he is a bit undersized. Can Dolidze get the grappling going? I don't even know. I've not even seen Dolidze's grappling in MMA. Someone told me his wins on the ADCC trials were outside heel hooks, and then when he actually went to ADCC, he got wrecked in the first round. So I don't think he's some killer grappler. And like I say, his means of getting a fight to the floor, it didn't look good in the fight with the Brazilian. He couldn't get him down. So I'm picking John Allan here. I think the line's off. Plus 160, plus 170. I think you've got to take a risk on John Allan here. I think he's a solid enough fighter on the feet. I like his stand-up. So Allan for me. Montana De La Rosa taking on Taila Santos next. I feel like Montana's getting a very similar fight here to the one she had against Vivi. I bet Vivi there at about minus 170. Talia's bigger favourite here. She's getting bet up a bit. She's my best price now. Looks like minus 205. You can get on her. Look, Montana needs to get this fight to the floor, most likely. Her stand-up did look a bit better against Vivi. Did look like it had improved since some of her earlier UFC fights where it really didn't look good at all. She is a tough girl, Montana, but she has problems with her nose. She had surgery on it, but it doesn't seem to have fixed it because her nose went against Vivi as well. And I think it gives her breathing difficulties during fights. Vivi attacked her calf a lot in that fight as well. Caused her to have to switch stances a fair bit. Her wrestling's not bad for a lady, but we saw it against Andrea Lee. She was getting takedowns, but she just couldn't keep Andrea Lee down. Andrea Lee would scoot back to the fence, or she'd be taken down on the fence, and she kept working her way back to her feet. We did see Taila struggle with Barella in the first round anyway. She got taken down in the first round. The second round, she got held up against the fence a lot. And then the third round, she came on strong in the stand-up. But she looked completely different for me against Molly. Even look at her physically. She looked different physically. I quite like Taila. I like her stand-up. She seems physically strong. I don't think she's not quite as fast as someone like Vivi, but I think physicality-wise, she matches up with someone like Vivi. I actually, after Vivi beat Montana and after Taila beat Molly, I actually thought Vivi versus Taila would be a great fight, but they've obviously matched Taila up with Montana, and it just feels like Montana's getting another tough fight here. She's going to need to fight on the floor. I don't think she's going to be able to hang with Santos on the feet. So I have to go with Santos here. I think she's a promising prospect in the division. I'm interested to see where she goes. Nice stand up, as I say. Physically, she looked very strong against Molly, and just just aesthetically, she looked different than the lady that fought Barella. She definitely looked like she's put on some muscle. I think it's going to be a rough night for Montana again, if I'm completely honest here. It's just a line, minus 200. It's just, I would have preferred a similar line to where she was against Vivi. I mean, what you can look at is the decision line for Santos, whether you want to split decision and money line, maybe. A little bit risky, but it is women's MMA, and Montana is tough. I'd be surprised if Santos can get her out of there, but I have to go with Santos here. And I don't think Montana done a camper. I think for the fight with Vivi, I think she trained either, I can't remember if it's Factory X or Elevation, one of the two. But looking at her Instagram, it looks like she's trained back at home for this fight as well, and which isn't ideal because she did look a bit improved on the feet. And if you're then going back to your old camp after just one camp, it's like the improvements aren't going to continue. So I'll go with Santos. Hill against St. Preux. Interesting fight here. There's a bit of hype on Hill. He's the favourite, minus 160, minus 170. But a different fight for him here. He's fighting a fellow southpaw, so it's going to take away one of his main weapons, which is the body kick from the southpaw stance. He normally has a reach advantage. He's actually at a reach disadvantage here. So a couple of things straight off the bat that he's going to have to deal with that he's not really had to experience before. Now, I know his last fight against the Brazilian was a southpaw, but, over very quickly. And he had a clear stand-up advantage there, even when you factor in that he was facing another southpaw. OSP's, a bit of a different level on the feet. Very experienced guy. He's been in there against the best, been around for a long time. And also, the takedown threat as well from OSP, which I thought the Brazilian guy was going to have against Hill, but I guess the fight was over before it really started. But OSP, we know he's very dangerous on top. Hill takedown defense didn't look great against Darko. Darko in that third round managed to get a lot of takedowns. So he's got to be careful against OSP here, because OSP's not a man you want on top of you. Hill does have good volume though. Real good volume. He's not really fought anyone though. He's kind of had his way with his opponents in the sense that, they've been a level below him. So, the stats on his significant strikes are a little bit misleading, because he's up at, I think it's like 7 or 8 significant strikes landed per minute, which is really high for a light heavyweight. He can hold a good pace. He's definitely going to have the volume on OSP on the feet. But like I say, he's losing the body kick, which he goes to a lot. He does have a nice jab. It's going to be interesting to see who is the one on the front foot here. We saw OSP. He fought really smart last fight against Manyfield. Just put him on the back foot, used his reach. Here he's got a reach, but, a lot less. He's only a couple of inches. So I kind of understand the argument from both sides here. But for me to bet Hill, I'd need a lower price. This is a step up in competition for him, and it's going to ask some questions of him. But he does have the speed, he does have the volume, but he is hittable as well. I'm not sure how. I know he rocked the Brazilian with his hands. I know he ultimately stopped him with the body shot, but I'm not sure if Hill's a massive puncher. I definitely give power advantage to OSP. So Hill might. He might need to win a volume decision here. That might be his most realistic path to victory. But he is a lot younger, and we know in combat sports age can be such an important factor. So I've got to lean Hill here. I think, but I'm not confident on it. This is, it's a bit of a mirror match here, but just, a young lion against the old lion. So. And OSP having that grappling threat, but if the fight does stay on the feet, I've got to lean towards the volume of Hill here, I think. So I'm going to go with Hill to win a decision, but it's not a confident pick. I wouldn't bet him at his current line. And OSP, I'd probably need a bit of a higher price to pull the trigger on him as well. But it's a very interesting fight. It definitely gives us a better idea of where Hill was at. Because if he converted 27 OSP, or even put him away, then it definitely the kid's definitely got a decent ceiling. But this will be a very interesting fight to watch for me. It's one that I don't feel I have a strong lean on. It is set at over 1.5, which I was hoping for, but price is a little bit high. I mean, minus 170 is basically sitting at minus 165. But I do feel that the over is going to hit there because, like I say, Hill is more of a volume guy. I don't think he's a huge puncher. I'd be surprised if he puts OSP away. And OSP does have power, but he's going to have to land on Hill. And, Hill's going to be on his bike. He's going to be hitting and moving in and out. But it is the small cage as well to factor in. But for me, if I have to bet this fight, I'd probably be looking at the over 1.5 personally. And it's basically the same price as Hill's money line. And I'd be really surprised if Hill comes in and puts OSP away quickly here. Main event, we've got Jack Hermansson taking on Marvin Vettori. Really good fight here. Vettori coming in on a few days' notice. He was scheduled to fight on the card. Was it this week or next week? He was scheduled to face Jacare. So he has had a full camp for a fight. Obviously, he was preparing for 3 rounds as opposed to 5. So that could potentially be a factor. Hermansson was meant to fight Darren Till. Till dropped out. Then he was meant to fight Kevin Holland. Holland's, I think, tested positive. And so now they brought in Marvin. And I actually prefer this fight than the Hermansson-Holland fight anyway. I think Marvin finally gets a step up in competition that he's been calling for. And we get to see if he is the, kind of top 5 title contender material. So Jack Hermansson's going to have about a 3-inch reach advantage on the feet here. Marvin Vettori's only had reach disadvantages against Ilia where he was at about a 6-inch reach disadvantage, and also I think he was 3 or 4 reach disadvantage against Mutante. So Jack Hermansson's coming for a quick win over Kelvin Gastelum, who's a training partner of Marvin Vettori over at King's. He's 21-5 MMA record. He's 5 losses, 4 have been inside the distance. Before the Gastelum fight, he lost to Jared Cannonier, got stopped in the second round. That was when I think that was in his home, well, it was not his home country, it was in Denmark, wasn't it? So kind of his area of the world. Before that, he got a good win over Jacare, 5-round decision. I haven't really bet Hermansson much. I think the only fight I've ever bet of his was 2 actually. I bet the Souza fight. I bet Souza, Jacare. Good performance from Hermansson. I mean, I think it was the first fight where Jacare kind of started to look his age. But I don't want to take away too much from the win for Jack, because it's a solid win over 5 rounds. And then I bet Jared Cannonier against him. Now, I didn't like the bet at all. I've got to admit, I took Cannonier at plus 200 before I did tape, because I was worried the line was going to go. I did tape and I was like, oh, gee, I hate this bet on Cannonier. I want to buy out, but I couldn't, because money was coming in on Hermansson. I think he closed at like minus 300 or maybe even higher. So I had to ride the bet, and well, I'm glad I did in the end, because I mean, Cannonier made it look really easy. So what I'm trying to say is, I've only bet 2 of his fights in the UFC, and even one of them bets I didn't like. I just kind of got lucky in the sense that I'd bet it pre-tape, because I thought the line was going to go, but the line went the other way, and I couldn't buy out of it. So he's a guy I'm a little bit wary of, because I don't feel like I have the greatest read on him. I feel like sometimes I can underestimate him, but I'm aware of that, hence why I've passed on betting on a lot of his fights. But he is a very competent guy. I mean, his best position is getting on top with the ground and pound. He's very dangerous from top position with ground and pound. We've seen that against Gerald Meerschaert. We saw it against Talis Latis. You saw it against Bradley Scott. And you've seen that he's dangerous even in transition. The transition guillotine he caught. And Gerald Meerschaert. I know he ultimately got a submission, but he was pounding him from the top. But in transition, he's dangerous as well. We saw that against David Branch, where he caught him with that guillotine, and we saw it against Gastelum, where he caught him with a heel hook. So he is dangerous on top, and he's got some very good transitions with his submissions. So he's a dangerous guy. What I do feel is a bit of a weakness for him is, I mean, he's been stopped in 4 of his 5 losses. So for me, not 100% convinced on his durability, and I have a little bit of a suspicion that if things aren't going his way, he can check out a little bit. I think we saw that against Jared Cannonier. Couldn't get the takedown. I think it sapped his belief. He really struggled with Mutante. Mutante kept him on the outside on the feet, took him down and quickly subbed him. I'm not entirely convinced how good he is from the bottom either. I mean, you don't see him there often, but obviously he struggled with him as Mutante on the bottom. Tails latest, I know I don't know what it was it his rib or whatever? I know he had some kind of injury during that fight, but I don't know how much of a factor it played, because he ultimately came back and won, but he didn't look great when he was on the bottom in that fight. But we haven't really seen him there that often. And then it's not something I can put a finger on exactly, but I just had this suspicion that when the going gets tough, he can kind of check out a little bit. But having said that, he did, he showed some grit against Jacare, because there was a point, I think it was round 3, where Jacare started to come back. And I thought, the tide's turning here. But, he ultimately came back from it well. So he's a good fighter, but I think Marvin needs to really try and force mistakes out of Hermansson, get him panicking, get him so things aren't going his own way, and see if he can bring some kind of quit out of him. Marvin Vettori is a fighter that's really improved in his UFC run. He had about a 15-month layoff after the Adesanya fight, where he lost a split decision. I don't know if it was a split. I thought Izzy done enough to win the first 2 rounds, but he did take the 3rd round off of him. And when you watch, I can't remember what round it was. I think it was round 1. It is actually pretty close on the feet. Izzy didn't run away with it. Now I know Izzy does normally take a round to get his reads and whatnot, but it was a fairly close round on the feet. But he had a 15-month layoff after that fight, and for me, he's come back looking much improved fighter. 30-27 Mutante and Andrew Sanchez, and first round submission win over Carl Robertson. I really like Marvin Vettori's boxing. Now, I know he does a lot of boxing with some real high-level boxers in California. He goes to a boxing club over there. I can't remember who it was. I saw a picture of him with a chap. I think he's like 40-0 as a pro before the Robertson fight. And when you go and watch his fights, you can see that he does a lot of boxing sparring, because Vettori, it used to be a case of he's kind of, he barrels forward, blitzes, and he's dangerous, but he's actually not a bad counter striker. I was actually really surprised when I went back and watched some of his fights, how he actually counters, because the concern for me with Vettori is the cardio. Has let him down in the past a little bit. You can see he kind of gets tired as fights go on, but he's one of these that fights through it well. He's not someone that falls apart. You've either got the type that will tire and they start to fall apart mentally, but Vettori's not. He's got really strong belief in himself, and you can see that just the way he carries himself before fights and in his interviews and so forth, and he replicates that in his fights, and he really fights through it well. So when you think he's tired, he still keeps going. But what he can do, I've noticed in fights now, is when he's moving forward, he will blitz. So on the front foot, he'll blitz with combinations. Then he'll back off. Then he'll have another blitz. When he wants to take a bit of time off in a round, he will step back and he'll go on the back foot, and he actually counters really well. He's really got some accurate hands with his counters. He's got a really nice pullback left hand. And the other thing to point out as well is the southpaw. Now, Hermansson on the feet is an orthodox fighter. Got a bit of a herky-jerky style. He kind of likes going to his low kicks, but, the low kick is still there against the southpaw, but it's to the inside leg as opposed to the outside. So that's going to change things up for Hermansson here as well, with regards to what he's going to do with regards to the leg kicks. And Marvin Vettori, as I've said, back foot or front foot, he's pretty competent either way. He's really come a long way. He doesn't throw many kicks. He will throw some body kicks from the southpaw stance. But I don't expect that to be a major weapon for him here against Hermansson. I think he's going to approach the fight like he normally would, in the sense that he'll blitz forward. When he wants to take a bit of time off, he'll go on the back foot and he'll try and counter jack. And I do think Vettori's got the better hands. I don't think Hermansson's going to be able to get him down. Vettori's very physically strong for the middleweight division. I think he's the physically stronger fighter here. Mutante's got one of the best blast doubles in the division, and I think he shot maybe 4 or 5 times on Vettori, and Vettori just shut him down. Andrew Sanchez, very good wrestler. I think he only attempted the one takedown on Marvin, and Marvin shrugged him off easily. He controls Mutante in the clinch position. Mutante's very physically strong middleweight. And Andrew Sanchez, who I remember GSP saying is one of the best kind of clinch fighter he's seen against the cage. There was only, I think, one clinch exchange, but Marvin, he held his own with Sanchez in the clinch exchange. I think he was actually the one that was controlling it. So I think Jack's going to have a problem getting this fight to the floor. I don't think his shots are going to work. I don't think he's going to be able to, a lot of his takedowns come from like the body lock. I don't think that's going to work against Marvin. And Marvin has shown that he's very competent from the bottom as well. Obviously, in transition, he has to be very careful getting up with his neck, but he's shown that he's a hard man to hold down. And Marvin's also got very good ground and pound. If you go back and watch the fight with Carlos Jr., which is like 4 years ago, and he's a completely different fighter now. He has Carlos Jr. in some big trouble towards the end of the second round when he's unleashing the ground and pound. Amari Akhmedov, In the third round, he gets on top of Omari, and he has Omari in all sorts of trouble. And also, you saw against Carl Robertson, I mean, he got the submission, but it was ultimately set up with a ground and pound. So, if Jack finds himself on his back, you've got to be careful. And obviously, Marvin has to be very careful if he ends up on his back, because, as I said, he is good at getting back to his feet, but Hermansson is very good on top. But ultimately, I think if Marvin gets on top here, this would be very dangerous for Jack as well. So, a very interesting fight. But I think it's a great opportunity for Vettori to stamp himself as a contender. He's finally got the fight he wanted. I think he's had trouble getting fights. I think a lot of people have been avoiding him because he's a tough fight for most, and he's still not really got that. He's not really a big name in the division still, because he's been struggling to get the big fights. Obviously, he did fight Ilia a few years ago, took him to a split. But besides that, he's not really had the step up in comp that he's wanted. But he's getting that here against a perennial contender. So Marvin has to watch the cardio though. That's the one thing to add. It's his first 5-round fight. Jack's cardio seemed very solid against Jacare. Marvin, he's a muscular guy for the division, and you can see that he does start to slow down in fights. But as I said, he fights through it well, and he does have a good system in place now where he can step off and not pressure as much and fight on the back foot and still win minutes while he's taking a bit of a break. So I think he'll be able to fight through the 5 rounds fine. I don't think he's going to drop off a cliff to the point where Jack's going to be just hustling him on the feet or start being able to toss him down to the mat. I just think stylistically it's a tough fight for Jack, and it's a small cage as well that favours Vettori. Vettori doesn't have the most power in the world. He's not the greatest finisher on the feet, but I wouldn't say he doesn't have any power at all on the feet, and he does have good hands. Andrew Sanchez is very durable. I think a lot of guys probably would have gone down under some of the shots that Vettori was landing. So I wouldn't be shocked if he could overwhelm Hermansson on the feet here and force the stoppage, especially as the fight wears on. Because like I say, with Jack, I just wonder if there is some quitting in that can be brought out here by Marvin. And I wonder if Marvin will attempt to grapple at all to get on top. He hits some nice takedowns on Villante. He didn't bother against Sanchez. Sanchez was just impossible to take down, I think. And then he obviously took Carl Robertson down. He can definitely take Jack down. He's got to watch his neck though when he goes for the takedowns. But I wonder what the game plan will be, whether it will be smarter just to keep it on the feet and see how things are going on the feet. And if things are maybe more competitive than they may be imagined on the feet, then maybe switch it up and look for the takedown, because I definitely feel he could give Jack some serious problems if he could put Jack on his back, but he's just got to watch his neck. And I guess if he's winning the fight on the feet fairly comfortable, it would be the best place to keep it. And durability advantage goes to Marvin for me. He's shown a rock solid chin. Jack isn't known for his power. I don't recall him ever hurting anyone standing on the feet. So I have to give the advantage to Marvin standing, and I think he can dictate where this fight goes. But the 5 rounds does, raise a question mark. But I like Marvin here. I think he's going to stamp himself on the division Saturday night and start to get them bigger fights. So that wraps up the card, guys. Good luck with your bets. Hope you catch some money, and I'll be back next week to break down next week's card.